Hi Year 7, it's Miss Theka here again with your fifth lesson, carrying on with the topic of Elizabeth I that we have been looking at over the past couple of lessons. Slightly different today. I'm coming to you not so live, rather indirectly from school. So I've just found a quiet classroom to come and sit in and record this. So I'm not in my house today, which is a nice little bit of change. Same as usual, you need a pen, some paper to write on. The title today is Why Was Mary Queen of Scots Such a Problem? So today we are looking at Elizabeth's cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, and we're going to be thinking about why she was such a threat to Elizabeth. So the first thing I want you to do underneath your title is draw this little thinking map for me. In the middle circle, you would write MQS for Mary Queen of Scots. And in the second circle here, write anything you think you might already know about Mary Queen of Scots and the problems that Elizabeth faced when she first became Queen. So pause me for a minute now, get your date and title in, get your thinking map in, Mary Queen of Scots in the middle, and then any information in the second circle, and then we'll get going with the lesson. Okay, so as we know, because we looked at this last lesson and the lesson before, Henry VIII has a grand total of 6 wives. That's his first wife there, Catherine of Aragon, and they're the following 6. From those 6 wives, he has 3 children. The first to reign was his son, Edward. Then, after him, his eldest daughter, Mary Tudor, reigned, but they both had quite short reigns. They weren't king or queen of England for very long. So when Mary died, Elizabeth, Henry's third child, inherited the throne. So she became queen in 1558, and she's well known as being one of the longest reigning monarchs and one of the most successful reigning monarchs. But if you can remember last lesson, we talked about some of the problems that Elizabeth faced when she was queen, such as the fact that many people claimed that she wasn't the lawful queen. She had problems with religion as well, with Protestants versus Catholics. She had a problem with Spain too, and she also had the problem with the fact that she was a woman and people didn't take her seriously because she refused to marry. Today, we are looking at possibly one of Elizabeth's biggest problems. One of Elizabeth's biggest problems was actually her own cousin. So this is Mary Queen of Scots, not Mary Tudor. This is Elizabeth's sister, Mary Tudor, also known as Bloody Mary. This is Mary Queen of Scots, Elizabeth's cousin. So everyone always gets them confused. They are not the same Mary, 2 different Marys. The biggest reason why Mary Queen of Scots was a problem was because Mary was legitimate. So I want you to write this keyword down for me, please. Legitimate means you have true royal blood. Mary Queen of Scots could claim the English throne if she wanted to because she had a royal bloodline. Her mother had been directly related to Henry VIII. The problem was, a lot of people claimed that even though Elizabeth was queen, that she wasn't a legitimate queen because her mother had been beheaded for treason by Henry VIII. So a few people looked at Mary, Queen of Scots, as being a more lawful queen than Elizabeth. So this caused some problems. This situation seems to get even worse, however, when a series of unfortunate events unfolds for Mary, Queen of Scots, one of which being Mary's husband is murdered, and that has a direct impact on Elizabeth. So this is how I would normally do it. I would normally give you cards that have been cut out and you would shape them into a timeline, but obviously we can't do that. So instead, I've jumbled up the cards so they look like this. These form a timeline. So what I want you to do is probably going to take a full piece of paper, is I want you to read through these cards and write them down in correct chronological order. So you should have a full picture as to the events that make Mary Queen of Scots even more of a threat to Elizabeth. So you need to look at the years and you need to put them in the right chronological order. So that means in time order, starting with the one that was furthest to go all the way down to the one that was most recent. If it's the same year, I should have put a month in it as well. So if you say, well, there's 2 for 1567, which do I put first? Then you need to look at the month as well, and that should help you to figure it out. So read through all of these sections for me, please, and then write them down as a timeline so you have got the full picture as to what happened between Elizabeth and Mary. This will probably take you a while, so you might need to have this paused for quite a little bit, and then I'll go over the answers with you. So pause me now, please. Okay, so your timeline should look a little bit like this, hopefully, although I've done it sort of up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, which you might not have done it that way. But either way, this is the correct order, so I'm going to go through these now. The first one you should have had is this one, 1559. The Scottish Protestant lords rebel against Mary's family, who are Catholic, and Mary Queen of Scots flees to France. While she's in France, she marries the King of France. So Mary Queen of Scots' first husband was King Francis of France. Next card you should have had is 1560. The Scottish Protestants' Lord Rebellion ends. So the Scottish Protestants who had fought against Mary Queen of Scots' family, that war is over now. Next one, 1561. Mary is Elizabeth's relative, meaning she is legitimate. However, Mary promises Elizabeth that she will never try to take the English throne. Mary returns to Scotland after the death of her first husband, King Francis of France. So this is Mary's first husband. He's died of natural causes, so there's no point in Mary being in France anymore, so she comes back to Scotland, and this is where the situation starts to get a bit dodgy for Mary Queen of Scots. Number 4 should be this one here. In 1565, Mary marries her second husband, a guy called Lord Darnley. And a year later, in 1566, so this should be your next one, Mary gives birth to Lord Darnley's son. Well, why is this problematic? It's problematic for a number of reasons. Mary is willing to do something that Elizabeth is not. Elizabeth refused to marry and she would never have children, whereas Mary Queen of Scots is showing that she is willing to do that and she's prepared to provide an heir to the throne, which Elizabeth would not do. So again, this made quite a few people look towards Mary Queen of Scots and think that she was maybe the better option in comparison to Elizabeth. However, the situation starts to get a bit wrong. Next card, you should have had this one. In February 1567, Mary's husband, Lord Darnley, is murdered, probably by a man called the Earl of Bothwell. He was staying in a hotel, Lord Darnley, and the hotel was blown up using gunpowder. Lord Darnley had managed to escape the hotel, but whilst he was in the grounds, he was in the garden, someone found him and stabbed him. So he was definitely murdered, didn't die by accident. And all of the fingers were pointing at someone called the Earl of Bothwell. So what would you not expect Mary Queen of Scots to do? Well, you wouldn't expect her to then marry the man that had killed her second husband. In April 1567, so look at the time difference, it's just from February to April, Mary marries the Earl of Bothwell. This leads people to think that Mary was involved in the murder of her second husband, Darnley. So things are going a little bit pear-shaped for Mary now. Quite a few fingers are pointing at her. People think that she's guilty of murder and they want to put her on trial. So July 1567, this should be your next card. The Scottish Protestant lords rebel and they imprison Mary, and they claim that she should be taken to court and that she should be tried for the murder of her husband. However, next card. A year later, Mary escapes prison and she flees to England. She is hoping that her cousin, Elizabeth, is going to offer protection, is going to help her take Scotland back from the Scottish Protestant lords that are taking it off her, and is just going to give her a bit of support, really. However, again, that doesn't really pan out. Next card, this one, 1569. Mary is linked to a plot to kill Elizabeth and is placed under arrest in England. And the last one here, 1587. Mary spent the next 19 years moving from castle to castle while her cousin decided what to do with her. Mary became regularly connected to plots against Elizabeth. Elizabeth did not know what to do with her cousin. So Mary is obviously quite a dangerous character. She often claimed that she wasn't involved in plots that were created in her name. And the thing is, for some of them, we'll never really know just how involved she was. But for some of them, we definitely know that she was involved. So Mary is absolutely a dangerous woman, but this is difficult for Elizabeth. She doesn't know what to do with her cousin. She certainly doesn't want to kill her. That would make her look bad. So instead she decides to hold her captive for a really long period of time because that was decided as being the best option. So next, Elizabeth has got her own cousin in prison. So what does she decide to do with her? This is what I want you to think about. What could Elizabeth do? She could, one, help Mary to regain her throne in Scotland. So she could give her cousin an army and take them back to Scotland and try to help Mary Queen of Scots take her throne again. She could, two, hand Mary over to the Scottish lords and just let them deal with her, although that would probably mean her death because they wanted to execute her for the murder of her second husband, Lord Darnley. Three, she could kill Mary herself, and then that might maybe just sort of solve the problem. Or four, she could keep Mary in England until the day she dies of natural causes and just hope that Mary dies before she does. So normally this would be a bit of a discussion task, but obviously we can't do that. So instead, what I want you to do is pick the option that you think Elizabeth should do and explain why. And then if you want to, pick the option that you think is the worst. What should Elizabeth definitely not do? And then write that answer down as well. So pause me for a second. What do you think Elizabeth's best option is and why? And what do you think is Elizabeth's worst option and why? Okay, so what did Elizabeth actually decide to do? Elizabeth decided to allow Mary to stay in England, although she was constantly in prison, so she was never free. She couldn't roam, she couldn't go to the place she wanted to go to. She was always kept in different prisons. And by prison, I don't mean what we think of a prison. It was more like different castles she was kept in, really. She still had servants and she still stayed in like a royal bedchamber, so it certainly wasn't particularly horrible for Mary Queen of Scots, but she wasn't a free person. In 1569, the Scottish lords again tried to prove Mary's guilt in the murder of Lord Darnley, but Mary said that the Scottish court had no right to arrest her because she was an anointed monarch. So this is another key word here if you wanted to write this down. What this means is during the coronation process, so when someone becomes a king or a queen, they have to be coronated and it's a really big special celebration. A certain oil is rubbed on the forehead of the king or queen. It's a little bit like when a baby's christened and the vicar puts a little bit of water on the baby's head. This is a similar sort of thing. It's the most important part of the service and this is known as anointing. And when that happens, that means that person who was being anointed is a special person that has certain rules and regulations that only applies to them. So for example, because Mary was an anointed monarch, she said that they had no right to take her to court and that she wouldn't offer a plea to say whether she was guilty or not, because as an anointed monarch you can't be taken to court by law, and that is true. In addition, Elizabeth agreed with her, which you might think sounds a bit silly because Mary clearly played a part in the execution of in the murder of her husband. So why would Elizabeth not want Mary to go to court? Well, the thing is, if Elizabeth said that it was okay for Mary to go to court, technically she's also saying that it's all right if anyone ever wanted to take her to court because Elizabeth is also an anointed monarch. So Elizabeth's stuck between a rock and a hard place here. She doesn't really know what the right thing to do is, but either way she says that Mary can't go to court. So she lets Mary stay in England. If found guilty in court, Mary would be returned to the Scottish Lords and she would be executed. This would look bad for Elizabeth because Elizabeth would be seen as agreeing to kill an anointed monarch. But if found innocent and set free, Mary could raise an army to take Elizabeth's throne, which is something that she said she wanted to do. She said she was the true Queen of England, more so than Elizabeth, and she was involved in lots of plots to try to kill Elizabeth. So this is what happens in the end. Elizabeth keeps Mary in prison for 19 years. But during those 19 years, there were numerous plots and schemes that Mary Queen of Scots was involved in an attempt to kill Elizabeth and take the throne from her. These schemes confirmed that Mary was a real threat. Even though she was in prison, she was still trying to kill Elizabeth. Elizabeth continued to move her around the country, keeping her captive, but she knew deep down that whilst Mary remained alive, her throne was not safe. So after one particular plot and scheme known as the Babington plot, Mary's guilt was confirmed. It was proved that Mary was trying to kill Elizabeth with the help of other people that weren't in prison. So on Wednesday the 8th of February 1587, Mary Queen of Scots was executed by orders of Elizabeth. Elizabeth was very sad about the situation, but she felt as though there was no other choice. She had to kill her own cousin in order to keep her throne safe. So the last thing that I want you to do is go back to this mind map from the start. So you should have Mary Queen of Scots written in this circle. You should have had any problems that Elizabeth faced early on in this circle. Now finally, all the way around the outside, you do it a different colour pen if you've got it. Anything new that you've learned about Mary Queen of Scots today, and do you think Elizabeth made the right decision? Was it the only thing that Elizabeth could do was to kill her own cousin? Or do you think that actually maybe that was the wrong decision? Could she have tried something else? I want to see your opinion on it, please. Okay, so that is it from me. Thank you for tuning in again, and I will speak to you soon.